All eyes are on Detroit as they host the NFL Draft in 2024, and for good measure, locking up superstars on that Lions roster. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell, positional hit rates, questions on possible trades during the first round of the NFL Draft, and a whole lot more coming at you right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love our everydayers, and we love it when you're subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. The rare live YouTube episode here, Matt, as we are on draft eve. The NFL draft first round kicks off tomorrow. So some late news here with the Detroit Lions making big waves here as they host the NFL draft, and good for Detroit, good for the city, good for the franchise there. Things very different now in Detroit than they have been for, well, really most of my life, Matt. First, I want to let everybody know out there that this episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I have a competitive side, it's true, and that's why I'm a big fan of Monopoly Go. Williamson is too, and apparently he says he's really great. So we got to take each other on with Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on a classic Monopoly. So join your friends and maybe Williamson and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. So big news, big headlines for the Detroit Lions as we get ready for the NFL draft. And the day before the draft, they're doing market-setting deals for multiple superstars. Matt, Amon-Ra St. Brown has signed a 4-year contract extension worth more than $120 million, according to Ian Rappaport, with $77 million of that guaranteed. And then they turn around and Penei Sewell, just a couple hours later, is inking a 4-year, $112 million extension that makes him the new highest paid offensive lineman in the NFL, according to Mike Garafolo. So $85 million guaranteed. So fewer per year, more guaranteed for Penei Sewell. So the Lions locking up 2 stars to long-term deals. Are they making a statement timing this with the start of the NFL draft in Detroit, Matt?
Oh, I think so. I'm sure they probably could have released this 3 days ago or waited till after the draft, but I think it's just a welcome to Detroit. We keeping these guys for a long time. We're here to stay. You know, a lot of eyes are on the city. Happy draft day eve to all. Of course, I am super excited. Much of my lifetime, I've grown out of this a little bit. I really had a hard time sleeping on the night before the draft. I mean, more so than even Christmas Eve when I was 6, you know. Yeah, so
this is NFL fan Christmas.
No question about it. But these are the guys you want to invest in. I mean, I don't know that I could come up with a tackle, you know, including age, that I would rather invest in than Penei Sewell. And I don't care about the right tackle, left tackle thing. He could go to left if he had to, but he's the best right tackle in football, in my opinion. Whatever, who cares?
There just happened to be a guy that was at left tackle already when he came into the league.
Yeah, that's the only reason he switched. And St. Brown with, you know, both these guys' usage, work ethic, talent, performance on the field, instrumental importance. You know, nothing's happened with Goff yet. That one could still be on the horizon. Who knows? But yeah, St. Brown obviously has a ripple effect to Aiyuk and CD Lamb and these guys as well. I mean, I would imagine both those dudes, especially Lamb's, going to say, I want more than that, you know?
Right. 30 mil per year.
Pretty big.
And we'll see what the final numbers actually are. I have my doubts that all 77 million of that is fully guaranteed. And I have my doubts that it's actually going to turn out to look like $30 million per year, but we'll see what it ends up being for Amon-Ra St. Brown. Because those first numbers that are thrown out there from the agent side, sometimes a little fluffy, you know, a little puffed up from what they actually are when you see what the real deal is and what the structure of these contracts are. But for sure, it's going to have a ripple effect on the other wide receivers in the league. Brandon Aiyuk is, you know, number one amongst the guys who's been rumored to potentially be on the move on Thursday night. And so I don't know if anything's going to end up happening like that, but certainly once these deals get done, if you're a team trying to sign, say, Brandon Aiyuk, you were hoping to come in under that number. it makes your negotiations a little bit more difficult. Now, CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson know what numbers they're trying to for sure go over the top of when they do their deals this offseason.
I don't know if you noticed, but the Steelers opened up a little chunk of cap savings today by restructuring Alex Highsmith too. So maybe your boy's coming cross country. That's all the talk of the town right now. I don't see it, but
Well, it's funny because I was asked this question on Locked On 49ers from a listener about, of course, the Niners would ask for the Steelers' first round pick, and of course the Steelers would rather not. And I think they, along with maybe all 32 teams in the NFL, are trying to draft an offensive tackle in this class. Daniel Jeremiah earlier today saying that, he's hearing is teams, look for teams moving up for offensive tackles. So that could be the Steelers. That could be teams trying to go up ahead of the Steelers from the end of the first round. And, who knows what kind of movement there. Every team needs offensive line in the NFL, and it's a great draft for offensive tackles. I was asked the question, would a pick swap in the first round plus maybe something else move the needle on a Brandon Aiyuk trade? And specifically with the Steelers, would that be something you think the Steelers would be interested in? You keep your first round pick. You're not at 20 anymore, but you do get Brandon Aiyuk, and you still get to keep a first round pick.
I do. I don't think going down to 31 would be that terrible for the Steelers, because I don't think their target tackles are going to be there at 20 anyway, to be honest.
Might have to go up to get those guys anyway.
Yeah, the Fuagas and Lathams and Fashanus and those guys. We have so much to talk about, but the deals I've been hearing are, and this isn't from Mr. Rooney or Coach Tomlin, trust me. It's something along the lines of
Omar Khan is what you mean.
Right.
Yeah.
You give me 31 in Aiyuk, I give you 20, 51 in next year's second. Is the kind of deals I've been hearing.
Right, exactly. So so you were pick swapping, and then you get a something else later to make it work for all sides.
Mm-hmm.
Both teams are still in the first round, and the Steelers get their wide receiver, and
and then have to pay him a lot now. Yeah,
right. I could see that. I could see teams getting very. There's so many different ways you can come up with first round value if that's what the 49ers are really looking for. If it's not, but I also think it's who's on the clock and who's on the board. I think that's really important. So I would look for one of those trades to happen at 20, where Fuaga goes at 19 and the Steelers say, all right, let's call the Niners. We've kind of talked about a deal. Let's see if they still want to go. If the Niners, and John Lynch said there's 22 players with first round grades on their board. So maybe they still have a guy going up for them, and the Steelers don't like their guy anymore. That's when you make a deal happen, something like that. A team like the Carolina Panthers, they don't have a first round pick. They're on the outside looking in with the top wide receiver prospects. Everyone puts a wide receiver at 33. They have a pick at 39 as well. They could come up with a deal that is first round value, even though they're not in the first round, and go get a player like Brandon Aiyuk. If they,
no question.
The player has to want to sign a deal. T. Higgins is out there as well. There's a number of trades that could happen, Matt. And one of the questions we got from Twitter was over under on 4.5 trades. This one from Mark. Over under 4.5 trades in the first round Thursday.
So we're not going to count the Vikings-Texans ones as one that already happened, I assume. I mean, it has to happen on Thursday.
Right. But the ones that happened.
Let's say between now and when the final bell rings Thursday night. So
now and pick 32. How many?
So even if it happens like Thursday morning, I'm going to count it. You know what I mean? Like Aiyuk goes to Steelers, that counts.
Yes.
I'm going to say over. Although, no, I'm going under. That's a big number. I mean, that really is. I think
that's pretty close. I wonder if that's on FanDuel. Maybe that's why he's asking us. He's trying to get a little action.
I would imagine.
That's a good number. I think that's probably pretty close to what happens in most drafts, 4 or 5 trades in the first round. You're probably going to have 1 or 2 in the top 10. Then you have another player that gets traded. We had a question about Justin Herbert rumors.
I'm going over. I'm switching it up. I'm going over.
4.5. So you think 5 or more?
I think Atlanta or Chicago at 9 and 10, 8 and 9.
I think there's
one of them happens.
For sure 2 in the top 10, 2 trades.
I think so too. And I think you'll feel pretty comfortable about it. Like I've heard Philly wants to move up a few spots, And
then there's all those, because we always think of these big, huge moves. There might be one where a team just leapfrogs one team, and it's not.
Right. I think there's a lot of those.
Fourth rounder to go up 1 spot,
Yeah. I mean, the Steelers moved up 2 spots to get Broderick Jones last year. And, people don't think of that as a trade up, but that would count.
Yeah. And then just 1 player trade, and then
one player trade.
Yeah.
And then you're sitting there at 4. You're feeling comfortable. You got the under. and then the Raiders trade into 32 to take Penix, and you're
Right.
like, that was 5, you know.
Yeah, I like over as well on that. Herbert not being one of those, right? That was a question I
think that's bonkers.
On Twitter for us. Justin Herbert, that he's got a crazy contract, that big cap
They
hit.
just gave it to him,
and there's no reason to expect it could happen. There's no reason to expect that even if you love JJ McCarthy, if you're Jim Harbaugh, that you would end up with a better quarterback. Like, why would you do that? It's not happening. No Herbert. That's not going to be.
I don't think so. I mean, maybe Herbert or Harbaugh could convince the authority, the owners, that I plan on being here a really long time. I need as many picks as I can possibly get. I'm going to draft 12 Michigan fellas, blah, 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 blah. I mean, that type of thing. But no, I mean, it just makes no financial sense at all, to do Herbert to Minnesota.
Jason in the chat says, big surprise, Topic gets steered to 49ers Steelers. All right. No more Aiyuk talk. No more Steelers talk. Well, maybe a little Steelers 49ers talk. We'll see what happens in the chat. And because we're talking about
one other nugget. I apologize. I just saw this when I wanted to look at the Lions stuff. Doesn't sound like much, but I think it is fantasy and dynasty relevant that we're seeing 5th-year options being picked up too. Jamar Chase got picked up. Shocker. Well, instead of picking up Bateman's with the Ravens, they gave him a 2-year deal. He got a 2-year deal. So I could see the ball going his way a lot more going forward. It makes me think they still like Bateman. Everyone thinks that's like a bust of a pick.
Before that happened, I would have put money on Bateman being one of the trades, not a first-round trade necessarily, but maybe being on the move out of Baltimore.
Yeah. So I think they like him more than we might have thought.
Like that. Bottom out of his 5th-year option. I like the teams are doing that now. There's a lot of GMs willing to do things that unorthodox ways that we didn't see before. And I like that a lot. Which also usually means more trades, more GMs, a lot more and willing to move. Some teams can make 2 trades in the same round, right? The Cardinals make 3 trades by themselves in the first round.
Yeah, I'm liking that over 4.5 more and more the more we talk about it.
Me too.
I mean, no way the Vikes sit there at both picks, even if they don't get their quarterback. They're not going to sit there with both those first either.
All right, more questions from the chat. Let us know what you're thinking about with the NFL draft. And we've got positional hit rates to cover today and how close do teams follow their draft boards on draft day as well. Next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your vehicle, car, or truck, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Bring home that W, and it could not be easier with that Guaranteed Fit. Big green check mark. You find your part, and you get it quick and easy. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Okay, Matt. Something popped up on my timeline earlier today from Adam Schefter, and it came from an ESPN content producer who's crunching numbers about first-round hit rates and different positional rates. We talked a little bit about offensive line earlier and how it's such a deep offensive line class. And I guess it shouldn't be too shocking, but I was a little bit blown away how high the hit rate is for center specifically, but the 3 top positions that have the best hit rate in the first round of the NFL draft is center, offensive tackle, and offensive guard. That's pretty wild. And they're the only positions in the entire draft that are over 50% hit rate. Hit rates in this case being so that way to take some subjectivity out of it. Hit rates are just if you signed a second contract with the team that drafted you. So it's a little off because if say Brandon Aiyuk gets traded, that would be not a hit, even though it's clearly a hit of a pick, but he didn't sign.
Yeah, as I say, I know AJ Brown wasn't a first round pick, but he wouldn't have counted. You know what I mean?
And subsequently,
there's not many of them.
Wide receivers last. I mean, we're not even talking sniffing 50% here. 27% of wide receivers since 2000. So this is from
2000 to 2019. So they had to at least get to the point where their contract's up. So they didn't do the last few drafts.
Right. So 20 years of drafts, only 27% of wide receivers drafted in the first round got a second contract with the team that drafted them.
So I think this is really cool. I retweeted it. Adam Schefter retweeted it. But I wonder, I would almost like to take it another level and like break them down into 5-year increments over this 20 years, because I think wide receivers gotten safer and safer as we've moved on. You know, like I don't look at that as the most volatile first round draft pick, where I think linebacker got a lot more volatile because life's a lot harder in 2024 being a first round linebacker than it was in 2001.
There was a lot of really bad wide receiver picks.
The first stretch there, the Corey Colemans and Treadwells and
Darius Hayward-Bay. Guys that were fast and just not football players. And teams are definitely better there. But there's still,
it's still low. I mean, right.
Jalen Reagors and the, it's still not
like Ruggs and right
anymore. Right. Yeah. It's not as good as it is for a lot of other positions. And maybe that's one of the reasons why wide receivers are getting paid so much, even with how many good wide receiver classes we've had recently. First of all, you need a bunch of them. And second of all, the hit rate's not all that great when you draft them. So maybe it is easier to just go pay a guy that's already good or go trade for a guy that's already good and not have to worry about developing a position that seems to be pretty tough to scout, apparently.
Or draft one almost every year on day 2. You know what I mean?
That's the strategy. I mean,
that's really the strategy.
Second round is the sweet spot for wide receivers.
Yep. So a couple things stood out to me in this chart. And again, check my timeline, check Adam Schefter's timeline. The center thing is pretty cool. And I also think the guard thing is pretty cool. But combined, there was only 40 centers and guards drafted. And one center busted. The guards were 50%. But that tells me no one's overdrafting a center or guard. You know what I mean? Like it's Quentin Nelson. I mean, these are great players. They're great prospects that you probably had even a better grade than where you drafted them. People do overdraft tackles left and right. I mean, there's a shortage there, but interior lineman, no one's going to overdraft. I mean, that is a safe pick.
It's a safe pick because, you have to be so great, even be considered a first round guy. And these other positions, you're chasing traits. And
exactly.
It's always going to be a little dicey.
And I'm almost certain the center that busted, that's been bugging me, is Billy Price.
From
from the Bengals in Ohio State.
Right, yeah.
Interesting. And the other thing that stood out to me is just looking at these totals. Like I said, there's only 12 centers drafted in the first round, that whole stretch. Edge is so much higher than everything else. 104 edge guys drafted over those 20 years. Compared to the next number is wide receiver at 77. Like you only play with 2 edges on the field, and they certainly get overdrafted, but it's so many more edges than any other position. That kind of shocked me. I thought corner would be higher,
Well, speaking of chasing traits.
Yeah, right.
The ultimate trait position where everybody's an alien in the NFL.
And I also come to think of it, I bet, just a hunch, and someone wants to do homework, if you're a playoff team, I plan on playing with a lot of leads. I bet there's a lot of edges drafted from like 25 to 32.
Great question here from Vieta in the chat. Are 5-year deals as significant anymore than they used to be? Seems like people are re-up before then or trade cut before it hits year 5. I'm talking about the 5th-year option on those contracts. Because a lot of times we talk about, okay, a team's going to trade into the end of round 1 for that 5th-year option. I don't know if it matters.
No, it's much less important than it used to be because of the CBA. Because there's a lot more parameters than there used to be. Depends on the Pro Bowls you go to, playing time, that some of these guys get very, very expensive in their 5th-year options. So fewer and fewer 5th-year options are even getting picked up now than ever. Now, it's great if you draft Micah Parsons, and obviously the 5th-year option is still a deal for him as opposed to making him the highest paid defensive player in the league. But it's funny, this question actually correlates with our center conversation. So bring it back to the Steelers, of course. Everyone wants them to take Graham Barton to 20. Okay, fine. That sounds great. Perfect. But when his 5th-year option comes up, all offensive linemen are lumped the same. So he would be, if you pick up his 5th-year option as a center, like Baltimore's going to have this issue with Linderbaum, he's going to have to be the average of the top 10 contracts, including Trent Williams and Penei Sewell.
Yeah, they're all tackles.
You can't pick up a guard or center's 5th-year option, basically. It makes no sense.
The chat wants to know, Matt, no pre-draft haircut?
No. I don't think there's any videos in my future. So There you go. A little one. I'll put a little product in there tomorrow when we're on a little bit.
Gel it up. Slick that thing back. The Pat Riley. That'd be fun.
That's not my look. You would think I'm losing my hair for how high my here we go. Boom. How high my hairline is, but it's been like that since I was like 6.
Oh, okay. All right. More draft Q&A, Draft Eve. We're getting ready for the big event. How closely do teams follow their draft boards on draft night and more? Let us know. Give us your questions in the chat. We'll hit them next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Monopoly Go. And yeah, I've been told I'm a competitive person. Matt Williamson's competitive when it comes to Monopoly, apparently, something I did not know about him.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're competitive, Monopoly Go is for you, because I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times, by the way. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards, crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with your friends. You can charge them rent on those iconic Monopoly properties. You can heist their vaults and get those riches for yourself, and then watch the leaderboards and see if you rank higher than your friends as a Monopoly tycoon. And you can also join with your friends to open up community chests and climb those leaderboards and find huge rewards. And there's timed tournaments that are worldwide. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. How closely, Matt, this is from Joey Bag of Donuts, how closely do teams follow their draft board on draft night? Is there any debate, or do they know instantly who they want to take because it's just the next guy on the list?
Well, that's why there's a horizontal versus a vertical board, in terms, but that's more for later rounds, in my opinion. Now, I think dumb teams don't follow their board in round 1. Like, everyone plays fantasy. If you're picking 10, you can come up with 10 names. Worst case scenario, you get number 10. Second to worst case scenario, you get number 9. Like, it shouldn't change just because your buddy took whoever. If you do enough homework, you could come up with your first round player and stick with it. Now, it's funny he asked this because, bring it back to Steelers, I host this local podcast. I'm about to record it as soon as we're done here. And it's my last one before the draft. And this is Williamson's Steeler board. So what I did was I got a spreadsheet, and I start the podcast by saying, if an alien came out of the sky and gave the Steelers the first overall pick, who would I take? Caleb Williams. Okay. And then what if Caleb Williams gone? Who's number 2? Drake May, Marvin Harrison, blah, blah, blah. Does it really matter? Does the top 10, 5 or 6 matter? No, because the Steelers aren't going to end up with any of those players. However, I am looking at my Steeler big board, my thoughts, not theirs. And J.C. Latham is number 8. Now, I don't have any defensive end edges on here because I wouldn't take, not that they're bad players, but it's like I wouldn't take them for the Steelers, and so you recognize some people on my board are going to go anyway. So like my 20th player is Nate Wiggins. There's like a 0% chance at 20 I'm going to end up with Wiggins. That would mean like no defensive ends went. I do have guys like Brock Bowers on here, but there's a spot where I would take him. You know what I mean? So people think GMs lie when they say things like, he was one of the top 7 players on our board. Well, let me use this example. He was one of the top 8 players on our board, and they got him at 20.
Right.
Well, for my board, J.C. Latham is my 8th favorite Steeler. There's a chance, it's slim, but that he could get to 20. And if GM Williamson was up there, I would say we got a top 8 player, or something, you'd phrase it a little bit better.
Right. Really
at 20, and they're like, no, you didn't. Like, but on our board, we did,
And then they do lie when the guy that drafts at 45 says we got one of our first round guys. And
of course,
sometimes they are lying.
So of course.
Trust those GMs as far as you can throw them. But sometimes they're not lying. You have to put on the BS meter and figure out which one it is. with these guys. But yeah, that's how it can't be. That's how there's a chance it's not a lie, because the board's gonna be so different. Not everybody fits for everybody.
And what I also did, and I urge everyone to do this for their favorite team. It's hard, because the top doesn't matter unless you're picking super high. But I went well past 20, just saying, okay, because the top 18 are off the board and I'm picking at 20, but these next ones are all pretty similar. I'd feel real comfortable going to 24, but not to 26. You know what I mean? There's a teardrop there or whatever. But I think that, we got some breaking news here about.
Oh, here we go. What do we got? Hold on. We got a
Bengals.
T. Higgins?
T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson have requested trades from the Bengals.
Oh, Trey Hendrickson.
Trey Hendrickson. I didn't see that coming.
Okay. I thought we were already going to be in.
Yeah.
That counted, right? If T. Higgins got traded, that would have counted towards our 4.5 over.
Yeah, we already answered the question.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. Trey Hendrickson. And Hubbard's hurt too. I mean, people trying to get out of Cincy. I don't know. It's not the biggest news in the world. Requesting a trade's not the biggest news in the world, but day before the draft, so that's something.
Yeah, that's sending a message of some sort.
But I think you're foolish if you don't trust your draft board, because smart people spend a lot of time. Like I sit here and I stare at this thing. And I'm like, do I want Mims or DeJean? And one day I want Mims, one day I want DeJean. You know what I mean? Like there's some tough ones there.
There's some you're trying to break the tie. And there was a video of the Rams when they're drafting. Obviously, they didn't have a first round pick last year, but they were drafting Kobe Turner, who was it third? Was he a fourth round pick?
Yeah, he had to be a really good player.
And they had the argument. And Les Snead loved them. And they're like, but maybe we can wait. And Sean McVay is like, you love this guy. Isn't it going to hurt if we miss out on this guy? Go get your guy right now. And they had that conversation because they're, and I think Daniel Jeremiah puts it well. And I think the answer to the question, it's different for every team and everyone has kind of a different process. Daniel Jeremiah, when he's doing mock drafts, he talks about getting players in the right neighborhood versus the right house. And
he likes to get him by this time of the year. He wants to get him in the right house. But
right.
Starts with like the right zip code. And then
starts getting him in the right. Yeah, exactly. But I think when you're looking at your draft board, maybe there's something that breaks the tie for you, where if you put them 1 through 10, maybe 8 and 9 are so close that, well, we can't get that position later. So we're going to go with the 9 instead of the 8. And it's close enough. So I think it's more like a tiered situation. And you don't want to step out of your tier to force something. And I love that the Dallas Cowboys, for some reason, don't care about their draft board getting leaked. And like Jerry Jones will just take a photo in front of the draft board and put it out there on Twitter, right? But because you learn a lot about the process. And I think it was the Zeke Elliott draft. They drafted Jalen Smith, I think, that same year. Was that
Dak Prescott was that year too?
14? Yeah. Their draft board was public for everyone to see. They didn't draft the guy who was the top on their board when they picked. So yeah, it was out there. And I think both their first and second round picks, there was somebody else rated higher and they went with a different player.
So I know these guys don't grade 1 out of 100 scale, but for your team, you might have the guy with a 93 8th on your board, but the guy with a 95 10th, because he's more valuable to you, even though he's a 93 prospect versus a 95 prospect. You know what I mean? Because you can't get one in the second round. I'll take the receiver in day 2, You know
what? Speaking of the Bengals, there was that big argument about wide receiver or tackle. This is happening with the Chargers right now. We have a question about if you had to put $1 down on Jim Harbaugh going wide receiver at offensive tackle with their first pick at number 5, what would you pick, wide receiver or offensive tackle? Because the Chargers fans are going through that right now and having a lot of conversations. And my answer would be, who's the best player? And, that could be Alt, that could be Neighbors. That's an interesting one.
To me, it's an easy decision. I would take Neighbors or Odunze over Alt. But that's not what was asked. I think they're going to take a tackle.
You think it'll be tackle at 5 or wherever they end up if they trade down?
Yep, I do. I just think that's what the head coach is.
Looking at It's a good question from Slow Mo in the chat. Just before the draft, you hear a lot about risers and fallers. Actually, we did an episode about risers and fallers yesterday. Is there really that much movement the week before the draft, or is that just a reflection of media buzz creating hype? I don't think they're creating it. I think they're just learning nuggets of information. And then you hear, oh, wait a second, this team. Oh, and then I called another team, and they love this same player, and nobody's got him in the first round, but there's 2 teams I've talked to that like him in the first round. And I think that's what happens. So it's late information is rising and falling to us, by the way, there's 32 different draft boards. So
right. That's the thing.
Nate Tice has Kingsley Suamataia, which might be the most volatile player right now as far as people like him, if people don't. He's an offensive tackle. Tackle is a big need. A lot of teams want tackles. Does he go in the first round? Nate Tice, whose father was an offensive lineman, has Suamataia the highest of anybody, has him at 22 overall.
Wow.
And Daniel Jeremiah has him at 121.
That's insane.
Yeah, a 4th round guy. So that's a 1st round guy versus a 4th round guy. 99 picks between them. And those are 2 very well thought of. They're 2 of my favorite analysts. Yeah, right. Analysts I trust a lot, and they are that far off on one guy. So you might hear about Suamataia rising and falling this week.
That's interesting. Yeah, because on some board, the board, this question, it's more media buzz creating hype, but it's more media learning things or being told things right or wrong.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's also lies galore.
Well, I find it fascinating that teams are fighting and clawing to get up to get quarterbacks, and then when they interview anonymous execs who don't need a quarterback, they're like, oh yeah, we got a 3rd round grade on him. It's really funny when, if you need a quarterback, you love him, and if you don't need a quarterback, you're like, well, that guy stinks, I wouldn't touch him. But if you need a quarterback, you might like him a little bit more.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's again, believe what you want. The truth. That's my favorite part about the draft is there's no more lying. It's just like the first week of free agency. I say this every year. I like it better than game day, even because it's the only time the teams don't lie to you. I mean, as long as you can decipher the moves, why they make them, there's no lying on draft day.
And the best draft information, there's a lot of smoke right now. The best draft information is tomorrow morning, Thursday morning, the morning of the draft. Analysts put their best drafts, their best mocks out there. They want it, they want to be accurate on those. You get some really good information. And teams are a little less guarded, letting some secrets out on the day of the draft, it seems like. And so we'll find out what this stuff leading up, if it's even true with a lot of it. So that'll be fascinating.
So we are doing a show tomorrow, right? Like our normal time, but I urge everyone to check it out, of course, but it will become obsolete 8 hours after that or whatever.
I think we might need to keep tabs on that late information. What is the most believable late information on Thursday morning when we do our podcast? Noon Eastern is when we record. So as of then, whatever the latest, most interesting information is probably what we're going to focus on tomorrow's episode.
Yeah, what are we believing and what are we not, Cool.
Thanks everybody for jumping in this live episode of Peacock and Williamson, the rare live. It was a lot of fun. I think we need to do it a little bit more often. Can't wait. NFL draft is here. I am super pumped. It is Christmas for most of us, and that is absolutely the way I feel right now, like a kid on Christmas Eve. And of course, be back with us tomorrow. And after round 1 and after all of the NFL draft, Matt and I will be here breaking it all down, Peacock and Williamson style.